For more than a decade, Penny from The Big Bang Theory was not just a character. She was a cultural constant. Week after week, she walked into that Pasadena apartment with a smile, a sarcastic comment, and an energy that balanced genius with humanity. To millions of viewers, Penny felt real, familiar, almost permanent. And that is precisely why the latest wave of headlines about tragic news surrounding Penny has spread so quickly. Because when a character becomes that deeply embedded in people's lives, any change connected to her feels like loss, even when no single disaster has actually occurred. At the center of this confusion is Kaley Cuoco, the woman who gave Penny her voice, her timing, and her warmth. What many fans are struggling to accept is not a shocking event, but a slow, unavoidable truth. Penny does not exist anymore, except in reruns. And Kaley Cuoco has been living in a world that moved on long before some viewers were ready to follow. The so-called tragic news is rooted in that emotional gap. It is the collision between nostalgia and reality. Since The Big Bang Theory ended, Cuoco's life has continued in ways that are both ordinary and deeply personal. She has taken on darker roles, produced her own projects, spoken openly about failed marriages, emotional exhaustion, and the pressure of being permanently associated with one defining role. None of this fits neatly into the upbeat image many fans still hold on to. For an audience that grew up with Penny as a symbol of comfort and humor, watching the actress behind her evolve into a more complex, sometimes vulnerable adult feels unsettling. And in the internet age, discomfort is often repackaged as tragedy. There's also something quietly painful about how fame freezes people in time. Penny never aged on screen the way real people do. Her mistakes were scripted, her heartbreaks resolved in 20 minutes, her future neatly wrapped in a series finale. Kaley Cuoco, by contrast, has had to navigate real loss, real change, and real consequences without a laugh track to soften the moment. When she speaks about stress, about anxiety, about the relief of no longer carrying a network television juggernaut on our shoulders, those words are sometimes twisted into signs that something is wrong. In reality, they are signs of someone finally speaking honestly. What fans call tragic is often the realization that the magic they remember was temporary. The Big Bang Theory was a rare phenomenon, a show that became ritual for millions of households. Penny was the emotional gateway into that world, the character who made the science accessible and the friendships feel human. Letting go of her feels like letting go of a simpler time. And when people see headlines hinting at sadness or struggle around the actress, it confirms a fear they would rather not face, that nothing that meaningful stays untouched by time. Yet, there is another layer that rarely makes it into clickbait titles. Cuoco herself has repeatedly expressed gratitude for Penny, even as she works to define herself beyond her. Gratitude and grief can exist at the same time. You can love what a role gave you and still mourn the parts of yourself it consumed. That tension is not scandal. It is not collapse. It is growth, even when it looks messy from the outside. So when people say, the latest news on Penny is so tragic, what they're often responding to is not a factual event, but an emotional reckoning. Penny was a chapter that closed. Kaley Cuoco is a person still writing her story. The tragedy, if there is one, lies less in her life today and more in how uncomfortable the world becomes when a beloved illusion fades. Beyond the headlines and fan speculation, Kaley Cuoco's journey since The Big Bang Theory illustrates a larger, often overlooked aspect of Hollywood life, the tension between personal identity and public persona. For years, the audience associated her primarily with Penny, the quick-witted, charming neighbor with a heart as big as her ambition. It was a role that brought fame, financial security, and cultural relevance, but it also created a prism through which every action, appearance, or decision would be judged. Social media amplifies this dynamic. Every smile on the red carpet, every interview quote, every fashion choice is dissected and repackaged into narrative threads, often suggesting drama or hardship where none exists. The tragic framing of news about Penny is, at its core, a misunderstanding of the natural progression of life and career. Kaley Cuoco, now in her 40s, has shifted priorities. She is no longer confined to a single sitcom persona. She has stepped into producing roles, most notably with her work on The Flight Attendant, where she not only starred but also took creative control behind the camera. This transition marks a significant step in her career, one that demonstrates autonomy, ambition, and a willingness to embrace challenges beyond acting alone. Yet, audiences conditioned to see her only as Penny sometimes misread this as a departure or even a loss rather than an evolution. One of the quieter tragedies, then, is how fame freezes people in the collective imagination. Fans who grew up laughing with Penny are often reluctant to accept the real person behind the character. They forget that Kaley Cuoco, like anyone else, faces everyday struggles, career recalibrations, and the emotional labor of redefining herself after an iconic role. There is also the element of public scrutiny. Media outlets frequently speculate about her personal life, her relationships, her physical appearance, and even her emotional state. While most people can navigate personal challenges in private, a celebrity's challenges are often transformed into public drama. The result is a distorted perception of tragedy, a narrative that exists more in headlines than in reality. Cuoco has also been candid about mental health. She has openly discussed past struggles with anxiety and stress, both of which were exacerbated by the demands of network television and the unrelenting expectations placed upon her. In interviews, she has emphasized the importance of self-care and personal boundaries. Yet even these discussions are sometimes sensationalized, stripped of context, and presented as proof of some ongoing crisis. What is truly tragic in these moments is not her mental health, but the public's habit of interpreting normal human vulnerability as scandal or disaster. Family life adds another layer. Cuoco married equestrian Carl Cook in 2018, and while their union has attracted media attention, the coverage often treats everyday milestones, birthdays, vacations, or private gatherings as potential fodder for sensational news. Navigating fame while maintaining personal relationships is inherently challenging. Every public appearance carries the weight of expectation. Every private moment risks exposure. The constant spotlight can make ordinary life feel extraordinary, or worse, precarious. Professionally, Kaley's choices reflect a deliberate strategy to reshape her image. While she embraced the comedic timing and accessibility of Penny, she has since pursued roles that explore darker, more complex themes. This is particularly evident in The Flight Attendant, where she portrays a protagonist grappling with moral ambiguity, danger, and emotional turmoil. Critics and audiences alike have praised her for taking these risks, which further distinguishes her from the characters she once played. The risk, however, is that a segment of the audience still measures her against a static memory of Penny, expecting perpetual levity instead of complexity. This mismatch creates the perception of struggle or tragedy that is largely a construct of expectation rather than circumstance. Moreover, there is the broader industry context to consider. Hollywood often pigeonholes actors, particularly women, based on early success. Breaking free from a typecast role requires courage, resilience, and strategic planning, qualities that are often overlooked in sensational reporting. Cuoco's career trajectory is emblematic of someone who understands the value of reinvention. She is not merely surviving post-sitcom life. She is actively shaping it. Yet for the casual observer, who may see only clickbait headlines, the story becomes one of melancholy or downfall rather than growth. Social media amplifies the narrative of tragedy further. Fan communities, eager for engagement, perpetuate rumors, speculation, and unverified stories. Hashtags, viral clips, and comment threads create the illusion of a crisis, even when the actress is thriving personally and professionally. In many ways, the tragic news about Penny is a mirror, reflecting the audience's reluctance to let go of a beloved character and accept the real person who exists beyond the screen. At the core of this situation is a universal truth about human attachment. People connect to characters because they offer comfort, familiarity, and a form of escapism. When that connection meets reality, the passage of time, the evolution of the actor, and the complexities of adult life, there is often a jarring sense of loss. Kaley Cuoco embodies this tension perfectly. She has transitioned into a stage of life where her accomplishments, decisions, and challenges are authentic, yet the public persists in measuring them against a fictional yardstick. The tragedy is less about events in her life and more about the impossible expectations placed upon her by cultural memory. In conclusion, the latest news about Penny, framed as tragic, is a misrepresentation. The real story is nuanced. A talented actress navigating fame, personal growth, and professional reinvention. The so-called tragedy is rooted not in misfortune, but in perception, a reflection of how audiences hold onto nostalgia and resist the inevitability of change. Kaley Cuoco continues to thrive, redefine herself, and create work that challenges and entertains. The bittersweet truth is that growing beyond a beloved character is always difficult for both the actor and the audience, but it is not a tragedy. It is life. Beyond professional achievements and public appearances, the so-called tragedy surrounding Penny also highlights a deeper societal pattern. The difficulty audiences have accepting that childhood icons, beloved characters, and familiar faces evolve. Kaley Cuoco, after all, is no longer just Penny, the neighbor next door with the infectious laugh. She is a producer, a businesswoman, a philanthropist, and a woman navigating the complexities of adulthood under intense scrutiny. For fans, this evolution can feel disorienting. They are emotionally tethered to a version of her that exists only in reruns, in memory, or in nostalgia-soaked clips online. This emotional attachment often fuels speculation, sensationalism, and misinterpretation. Headlines that claim tragic news rarely reflect objective reality. Instead, they prey on the human tendency to dramatize change. The public, conditioned by decades of celebrity culture, often interprets any deviation from the familiar as alarming. When Cuoco posts photos of herself at an award ceremony, it can be read as evidence of struggle, aging, or personal turmoil, even if she is simply living her life. When she speaks candidly about past challenges or the pressures of fame, these honest reflections are sometimes distorted into tragic developments that attract clicks and views. What is essential to understand is that Kaley's journey is, in many ways, emblematic of all actors who grow up in the public eye. Fame freezes moments, trapping characters in amber while life moves forward. While Penny remains an eternal 20-something in the cultural imagination, Cuoco has lived through divorces, career transitions, public scrutiny, and the ordinary trials of adulthood. The contrast between public expectation and private reality is stark, and it is in this contrast that the media often manufactures tragedy. Social media magnifies this phenomenon. Fans and content creators alike dissect every public appearance, interpret every statement, and scrutinize every social media post. A candid smile becomes a sign of stress. A thoughtful glance becomes evidence of personal struggle. The amplification of such details transforms ordinary life into a spectacle of tragedy. Yet for Kaley, these experiences are part of the human condition, not a headline-worthy disaster. Another dimension to the narrative is the intersection of fame and identity. Cuoco has spent much of her adult life balancing the demands of a public persona with her private self. While Penny's charm and humor made her beloved worldwide, they also created a persona that overshadowed Kaley's individuality. Many fans still address her as Penny, and this persistent association can obscure the complexity of her real life. Speaking about anxiety, professional pressures, or even mundane challenges becomes, in the public eye, a story of downfall rather than a reflection of resilience and growth. Kaley's professional choices reflect deliberate agency. In The Flight Attendant, she chose a role that challenged her range and allowed her to explore darker, more nuanced territory. She has also stepped into producing, a move that gives her creative control and ownership over her work. These decisions are empowering, but in the public imagination, stepping outside the familiar sometimes appears as loss or tragedy. What audiences perceive as risk is, for her, calculated growth and evolution. There is also a generational element at play. Fans who grew up with Penny often view her as timeless, a symbol of simpler, happier days. The inevitable reality that the actress behind the character grows older, faces real-world challenges, and evolves is difficult to reconcile with a static memory. When the media presents any part of this reality in sensationalized terms, it reinforces a narrative of tragedy, even when none exists. Personal life, too, is scrutinized relentlessly. Cuoco's relationships, social interactions, and life milestones are often interpreted as signs of happiness or misfortune. The difference between public perception and personal reality is wide. What is portrayed as a tragic event is frequently a mundane or positive development, misread through the lens of nostalgia and expectation. This tension underscores the broader challenge of celebrity, maintaining individuality while under the gaze of millions who feel invested in one particular narrative. Yet, amidst the noise and dramatization, Kaley Cuoco continues to demonstrate resilience and self-awareness. She has embraced opportunities to grow, redefine herself, and explore roles that reflect her complexity as an adult. She openly acknowledges the pressures of her career and the demands of public attention, but she does so without succumbing to them. Her life is a testament to perseverance, reinvention, and personal authenticity, a reality far removed from the manufactured tragedy headlines suggest. In fact, the real tragedy, if any, lies not in her circumstances, but in the audience's inability to separate character from actor. Penny was a creation designed to entertain, comfort, and charm. Kaley Cuoco is a person capable of struggle, joy, and reinvention. When society conflates the two, it generates a false narrative of tragedy, a narrative rooted in nostalgia and expectation rather than fact. Ultimately, understanding Kaley Cuoco's journey requires empathy. It requires recognizing that change, growth, and evolution are not indicators of loss, but of life itself. The headlines that proclaim tragedy about Penny are, in truth, a reflection of collective resistance to change. The character's permanence clashes with the actress's evolution, and the friction produces sensationalized storytelling. For those willing to look beyond the surface, the story is not tragic, it is profoundly human. In summary, the latest news about Penny and the attention given to her tragic circumstances is less about misfortune and more about perception. Kaley Cuoco navigates the realities of adulthood, professional reinvention, and public scrutiny with strength, intelligence, and resilience. While fans may cling to nostalgia, the actress continues to thrive, redefine herself, and explore new dimensions of her career. The headlines may scream tragedy, but the reality is a story of growth, agency, and personal transformation, a narrative far richer and more inspiring than the clickbait version suggests. As Kaley Cuoco continues to navigate life beyond the Big Bang Theory, one of the most compelling aspects of her story is the tension between public expectation and private reality. Fans have long cherished Penny as a symbol of warmth, humor, and relatability, but the actress behind her has evolved into a figure whose experiences extend far beyond the sitcom universe. This evolution challenges audiences to confront a truth that is often uncomfortable. Beloved characters belong to the past, while the people who created them continue to live and grow. Cuoco's career choices illustrate her desire to expand beyond the boundaries set by her most famous role. While Penny defined her early years, she refused to let that single character limit her future. By producing The Flight Attendant, she assumed creative control, shaping narratives that reflect her own vision while exploring themes of moral complexity, suspense, and dark humor. Such projects demonstrate a conscious effort to redefine herself, not as a departure from Penny, but as an affirmation of her capability to thrive creatively. However, audiences conditioned to associate her solely with the sitcom may misinterpret this independence as struggle or personal difficulty. Equally important is how fame has altered ordinary experiences for Kaley. From attending red carpet events to navigating social media, every action is amplified and analyzed. A simple photograph can become a headline. A casual remark can be twisted into tragic news, and moments of personal joy or frustration are often framed as scandal. For someone who has spent her life in the public eye, maintaining a sense of normalcy is nearly impossible. Yet Cuoco has managed to carve out private spaces, whether through close personal relationships, charitable work, or moments of solitude, proving that resilience is a quiet but powerful form of defiance against sensationalism. The so-called tragedy also stems from the difficulty of reconciling nostalgia with reality. For many viewers, Penny represents a time when life seemed simpler, laughter was guaranteed, and the emotional stakes of the world were contained within a 22-minute episode. Kaley, however, lives in a world with far higher stakes, both professionally and personally. Divorce, career pressures, the responsibility of creative production, and the general pressures of adulthood are all part of her reality. Challenges that are inherently complex and nuanced, but often reduced to clickbait narratives. Social media further complicates this dynamic. Platforms amplify every fan reaction, every meme, every speculative comment, creating a feedback loop that reinforces the illusion of tragedy. When fans lament Penny as if she were still alive in a frozen sitcom reality, they inadvertently project anxiety onto Kaley, interpreting her normal life events as catastrophic. The headlines that scream tragic news are, therefore, less about Cuoco and more about collective nostalgia and the human discomfort with change. Yet, Kaley's response to this pressure has been remarkable. She openly discusses the challenges of fame, mental health, and identity while maintaining agency over her personal narrative. Her reflections on aging, personal growth, and professional evolution underscore an important lesson. Growth is often misread as decline by those who cling to the past. By embracing change, she demonstrates that evolution, whether personal or professional, is not inherently tragic but necessary. Her private life also reflects a careful balance between transparency and discretion. While fans are deeply interested in her relationships, daily life, and milestones, Cuoco has cultivated boundaries that protect her personal well-being. Public fascination with her marriage to Carl Cook or other life events can sometimes be mischaracterized as crisis. Yet in reality, these are the ordinary experiences of someone striving for both personal fulfillment and public engagement. Managing this duality is a subtle but ongoing triumph that rarely receives the recognition it deserves. Another factor contributing to the perception of tragedy is the contrast between the fictional Penny and the real-life Kaley Cuoco. On screen, Penny's challenges were scripted, her victories neatly wrapped, and her struggles contained within the format of a sitcom. In reality, Kaley's challenges are lived, unpredictable, and complex. Fans, accustomed to a curated and comforting narrative, may misinterpret authenticity as misfortune. The irony is that her life is richer, more varied, and more interesting precisely because it cannot be distilled into a simple narrative. Moreover, Kaley's resilience is reflected in her capacity to transform experiences into creative opportunities. Her work as a producer allows her to craft stories that resonate on multiple levels, exploring human emotion, suspense, and moral ambiguity. This creative agency is a direct counterpoint to the limiting lens through which some audiences continue to view her. By controlling her narrative, she redefines what it means to evolve from a beloved character to a multifaceted artist and entrepreneur. Ultimately, the headlines proclaiming tragedy about Penny reveal more about audience psychology than about Kaley Cuoco herself. People are naturally resistant to change and deeply attached to nostalgia. When an icon from their formative years changes, grows, or simply moves forward, the discomfort is often interpreted as disaster. But the reality is far more inspiring. Kaley Cuoco has navigated one of the most high-pressure roles in television history, transitioned into production, embraced diverse creative challenges, and maintained personal authenticity despite relentless scrutiny. The latest news, when stripped of exaggeration, is not tragic at all. It is a testament to growth, courage, and reinvention. Kaley Cuoco's journey from Penny to an accomplished actor-producer illustrates the complexities of life in the spotlight. Fame magnifies challenges, but it also magnifies achievements. The perceived tragedy exists only in the tension between audience expectation and reality. For those willing to see beyond nostalgia, Kaley's story is empowering, a masterclass in resilience, reinvention, and the ongoing negotiation between public perception and private truth. In the end, the story of Penny is over, but the story of Kaley Cuoco continues. Her life embodies both the weight of past fame and the excitement of future possibilities. Headlines may scream tragedy, but anyone looking closely will see strength, creativity, and the ongoing evolution of a woman who refuses to be confined by a single role or a static image. The true narrative is not one of sorrow. It is one of remarkable growth, a journey that is far richer and more compelling than any nostalgic longing for a fictional character could capture. As we reach the final chapter of this deep dive into the latest news surrounding Penny and Kaley Cuoco, it becomes clear that the narrative of tragic news is largely a reflection of audience perception rather than reality. The public's attachment to Penny, the character, is understandable. She was the embodiment of humor, relatability, and warmth, a constant in living rooms across the world for over a decade. Yet Kaley Cuoco, the actress, is living a life that is dynamic, evolving, and far more complex than any sitcom could depict. Understanding this distinction is crucial to separating fact from fiction. Since the end of The Big Bang Theory, Kaley has pursued opportunities that challenge her creatively and professionally. She has seamlessly transitioned from comedic roles to dramatic and suspenseful narratives, particularly through her work on The Flight Attendant. Not only did she star in the series, but she also served as a producer, asserting creative control in a way that reflects maturity, vision, and empowerment. These choices demonstrate a conscious effort to grow beyond the confines of a single role, a challenge many actors struggle to navigate successfully. Yet, to some fans, the shift from Penny's lighthearted persona to Cuoco's more nuanced, adult roles is misconstrued as a sign of hardship or personal crisis. The perception of tragedy is further compounded by social media and the 24-hour news cycle. Every public appearance, every candid interview, every glimpse into her personal life is magnified and analyzed, often through a lens of sensationalism. A smile at a premiere can be interpreted as masking sadness. A discussion about mental health can be framed as evidence of ongoing turmoil. In reality, these are everyday moments in a life lived under extraordinary public scrutiny. The disconnect between audience expectation and personal reality is where the tragic framing originates. Mental health advocacy has become a defining part of Kaley's post-sitcom identity. She has openly discussed anxiety, stress, and the pressures of constant public attention. Yet even these candid conversations are sometimes taken out of context, presented as dramatic evidence of misfortune rather than as part of a larger narrative of resilience. By sharing her experiences, she normalizes vulnerability while highlighting the human side of fame, a stark contrast to the neatly packaged world of sitcom storytelling. There is also a significant generational component to audience reaction. Viewers who grew up with Penny often treat her as timeless, an eternal symbol of youth, humor, and comfort. Kaley, however, is navigating adulthood, relationships, and career reinvention, realities that require adaptation, growth, and occasional discomfort. When the public expects the character to remain unchanged, natural evolution becomes misinterpreted as tragedy. In reality, this evolution is a sign of strength, courage, and personal development. Kaley's personal life, while scrutinized heavily, demonstrates her ability to maintain agency in the face of public curiosity. Her marriage to Carl Cook, her friendships, and her private milestones are handled with intentional discretion. By protecting her personal space while remaining transparent in select ways, she navigates the dual demands of fame and privacy with skill. This careful balance allows her to maintain mental and emotional well-being, an accomplishment that is often overlooked when headlines are crafted to dramatize her life. The distinction between Penny and Kaley Cuoco also underscores a broader theme: the challenge of separating character from actor. On screen, Penny's struggles were scripted, resolved within episodes, and cushioned by humor. Kaley's challenges are lived, complex, and deeply human. Audiences sometimes struggle to reconcile these realities, resulting in narratives that frame personal growth and evolution as tragedy. But in reality, her life is far richer and more empowering than any fictional storyline. Professionally, Kaley is redefining the boundaries of her career. She has embraced the dual roles of actor and producer, allowing her to craft stories that align with her values and interests. This control over her creative trajectory is rare in Hollywood, particularly for women who have spent years defined by a single iconic role. Her journey reflects strategic decision-making, resilience, and a commitment to personal authenticity, a narrative far removed from the manufactured tragedy often attributed to her. The audience's perception of tragedy also stems from nostalgia. Penny represents a period in viewers' lives that was comforting, predictable, and emotionally fulfilling. Letting go of that character and accepting the ongoing evolution of the actress behind her can create discomfort, which media outlets exploit for engagement. In other words, the tragic news is often more about audience psychology than any real misfortune in Kaley's life. In conclusion, the story of Penny and Kaley Cuoco is ultimately one of growth, resilience, and empowerment. While headlines may frame change as tragedy, a closer look reveals an actress successfully navigating the complexities of fame, career reinvention, and personal development. Kaley Cuoco's evolution from Penny to multifaceted actor-producer is inspiring, demonstrating that life beyond a beloved character can be dynamic, meaningful, and profoundly human. The legacy of Penny remains intact, a symbol of humor, charm, and relatability for millions of fans. But Kaley Cuoco's real-life journey transcends nostalgia, reflecting authenticity, courage, and the pursuit of creative and personal fulfillment. Headlines may scream tragedy, but the truth is far more compelling. The story is one of triumph, evolution, and enduring strength. Penny's world may have ended with the sitcom finale, but Kaley's story continues, richer, more complex, and ultimately far more inspiring than any fictional narrative could ever capture. Even beyond the headlines, the story of Kaley Cuoco and her character Penny offers a lens into the complexity of fame, identity, and cultural memory. While fans continue to mourn the loss of Penny, it is crucial to understand that what they perceive as tragedy is often nostalgia mixed with projection. Audiences want permanence from a character who is designed to be comforting, relatable, and endlessly engaging. But life, in all its unpredictability, rarely offers such certainty, and Kaley Cuoco's journey reminds us of the reality behind the glamour. Change is inevitable, and adaptation is essential. Kaley's professional trajectory since The Big Bang Theory underscores this point. She has deliberately sought out roles that challenge her range, explore complex emotional and moral landscapes, and reflect her creative ambitions. Her transition from lighthearted comedy to suspenseful drama exemplifies a willingness to take risks, a risk that the public, conditioned by the predictability of Penny, may interpret as instability or struggle. Yet for Kaley, it is empowerment. She has transformed herself from an actress defined by a single iconic role into a multifaceted creator, capable of shaping narratives both in front of and behind the camera. There is also the quiet reality of personal life under scrutiny. While headlines often dramatize relationships, birthdays, or vacation photos, the truth is more mundane and human. Maintaining privacy and agency in the face of public curiosity is no small feat. It requires resilience, discipline, and strategic self-presentation. Kaley has navigated these pressures deftly, balancing public engagement with personal boundaries. The so-called tragedy is less about events in her life and more about the distorted lens through which they are viewed. Social media amplifies these distortions. Every post, interview, or public appearance is immediately dissected, critiqued, and framed into narratives of joy, sadness, success, or crisis. A casual comment can become a headline. A smile can be interpreted as hiding pain, and everyday activities are sometimes transformed into evidence of hardship. This amplification does not reflect Kaley's reality. It reflects the collective need for stories that evoke emotion, drama, and urgency. The tragic news is thus a narrative created as much by audience expectation as by the actress herself. Another key element of this perceived tragedy is the tension between character and actor. Penny was carefully scripted. Her struggles were contained, her victories clear, and her emotional journey neat and digestible. Kaley, by contrast, navigates an unscripted life with real consequences. Her triumphs, failures, and growth are layered, nuanced, and ongoing. While fans might prefer the simplicity of sitcom closure, the complexity of real life offers lessons in resilience, adaptation, and self-determination. The public's attachment to the fictional world inevitably colors their perception of the actress's reality. Kaley's candidness about mental health adds another dimension. She has shared her experiences with anxiety, stress, and the pressures of celebrity life, truths that are often sensationalized as evidence of personal crisis. Yet speaking openly about mental health is a form of empowerment and advocacy, not a signal of tragedy. It highlights her commitment to authenticity, her willingness to challenge stigmas, and her capacity to navigate the unique pressures of fame with intelligence and care. The generational aspect of audience perception cannot be ignored. Viewers who grew up watching Penny associate her with comfort, humor, and simplicity. Accepting that the actress behind the character has aged, evolved, and chosen a path distinct from the sitcom world can feel uncomfortable. This discomfort is often projected as tragedy, even though the underlying story is one of growth and empowerment. Kaley's evolution illustrates how moving beyond a defining role is a necessary and natural process, one that is both courageous and inspiring. Furthermore, Kaley's achievements as a producer reflect her commitment to shaping her narrative. By taking control behind the camera, she asserts agency over the stories she tells and the roles she chooses. This transition represents professional growth, personal empowerment, and a refusal to remain defined solely by the character of Penny. The narrative that frames this as struggle or hardship misrepresents her intentional and strategic career evolution. Ultimately, the tragedy perceived by fans is not a reflection of Kaley Cuoco's life. It is a reflection of their attachment to Penny, a character that no longer exists outside memory and reruns. Kaley's reality is far richer. She continues to take creative risks, manage her personal and professional life, and redefine her identity on her own terms. Headlines proclaiming tragedy are often shorthand for nostalgia, collective projection, and the discomfort of witnessing change in someone the world once believed it knew completely. In conclusion, the ongoing discussion around Penny and Kaley Cuoco should not be read as a story of misfortune, but as a narrative of growth, resilience, and empowerment. Penny remains an enduring cultural icon, but the actress who brought her to life continues to thrive in ways that are authentic, complex, and deeply inspiring. The public may perceive change as loss, but the reality is one of remarkable evolution, personal agency, and creative fulfillment. The headlines scream tragedy, but the truth tells a story of triumph. The continuing journey of Kaley Cuoco, an actress, producer, an individual redefining herself beyond the shadow of a beloved character. Even as the media continues to frame the latest developments about Penny in sensational terms, the deeper narrative is about the human experience behind fame, growth, and identity. Kaley Cuoco's journey exemplifies how an actor's life after an iconic role is rarely straightforward. For many fans, Penny remains a comforting, unchanging figure, a symbol of humor, relatability, and innocence. But Kaley's reality is layered. She has matured, diversified her career, and embraced roles and responsibilities that require nuance, risk, and personal investment. Understanding this distinction is essential to separating sensationalized, tragic news from genuine life experiences. One of the most striking aspects of Cuoco's post-sitcom career is her ability to leverage her platform to take creative control. Producing projects like The Flight Attendant has allowed her to shape stories, develop characters, and influence narratives in a way that few actors who achieve early fame manage to do. These decisions reflect ambition, vision, and strategic thinking, not misfortune. Yet, for audiences still emotionally tethered to Penny, this evolution can appear disconcerting, often misinterpreted as evidence of struggle or loss. The challenge lies not in Kaley's life, but in the public's unwillingness to reconcile their nostalgia with the complexities of adulthood. The tension between audience expectation and personal reality is heightened by social media. Every public appearance, every interview, and every post is magnified, dissected, and reinterpreted. A casual smile may be read as hiding pain. A comment about stress may be misconstrued as evidence of tragedy. This amplification distorts ordinary experiences into perceived crises. For Kaley, navigating these pressures is part of the reality of fame, and her continued success demonstrates resilience and intelligence rather than vulnerability. Another contributing factor to the perception of tragedy is the generational attachment to Penny. Fans who grew up with the character remember her as a fixed point of stability, charm, and humor. Their attachment is rooted in memory, nostalgia, and a longing for a simpler time. When the actress behind that character evolves, audiences are confronted with change in a way that is emotionally uncomfortable. They want Penny to remain constant, even as Kaley moves forward, embraces new roles, and redefines herself. The discomfort created by this clash of expectation and reality is often interpreted as tragedy. Kaley's openness about mental health and the pressures of public life further complicates public perception. She has candidly discussed anxiety, stress, and the emotional toll of life in the spotlight. While her honesty is empowering and normalizes vulnerability, it is often misinterpreted by media outlets and audiences as evidence of personal misfortune. In truth, these conversations highlight her self-awareness, resilience, and commitment to living authentically under the scrutiny of fame. They demonstrate courage, not tragedy. Moreover, Kaley's personal life is carefully navigated, balancing public interest with private well-being. Her marriage, relationships, and personal milestones are selectively shared, maintaining authenticity while protecting boundaries. This careful management of privacy in a world obsessed with constant visibility is itself a form of empowerment. Yet sensationalized coverage frequently reframes these ordinary life choices as signs of misfortune. The public, conditioned to expect drama, often overlooks the complexity and intentionality behind her decisions. The contrast between Penny, a scripted and predictable character, and Kaley Cuoco, a real person facing unscripted challenges, is central to understanding the tragic narrative. On screen, Penny's struggles were contained, resolved within an episode or season, and cushioned by humor and structure. Off-screen, Kaley confronts real-life pressures, including career reinvention, personal growth, and the responsibilities of fame. The tension between audience expectation and personal reality fuels the perception of tragedy, even though the reality is one of agency, growth, and achievement. Kaley's professional diversification underscores this point. By producing, selecting complex roles, and embracing creative risks, she asserts control over her narrative and demonstrates strategic foresight. This evolution reflects not only professional maturity, but also personal empowerment, a stark contrast to the simplified narratives of tragedy often presented by media outlets. The reality of her life is one of ongoing achievement, learning, and creative expression. Ultimately, the headlines claiming tragic news about Penny reflect audience psychology more than factual events. Fans project nostalgia, longing, and resistance to change onto Kaley, interpreting evolution as misfortune. In reality, Kaley Cuoco continues to thrive creatively and personally. Her journey exemplifies the challenges of navigating life after an iconic role, balancing public expectation with personal authenticity, and transforming the pressures of fame into opportunities for growth. The real story, beyond clickbait and dramatization, is one of empowerment. Kaley Cuoco has successfully transitioned from a beloved sitcom character into a multi-dimensional artist, producer, and individual navigating adulthood under intense scrutiny. The perceived tragedy exists largely in the minds of fans who struggle to reconcile the past with the present. In truth, her evolution is inspiring, demonstrating resilience, strategic thinking, and the courage to redefine herself. In conclusion, the narrative surrounding Penny is as much about audience attachment as it is about the actress herself. While nostalgia may color public perception with shades of tragedy, Kaley Cuoco's reality is far richer. She continues to grow, take risks, and assert agency over her personal and professional life. Penny's legacy endures in cultural memory, but Kaley's life tells a story of empowerment, evolution, and authenticity, one that transcends nostalgia, defies simplified narratives, and ultimately inspires those willing to see beyond the screen.